Is a split timeshare coming between the two goaltenders for the Cats? We'll discuss all this and more on today's Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Friday, November 28th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the nation's #1 sports podcast network, where we have your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez, the host of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, and joining me on this Friday edition, Black Friday edition of the show, it is a Fairbanks Friday, which means Nich Fairbanks is back here on the show. Shout out to every day who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix. Today we are going to discuss the goaltending duo between Sergei Bobrovskys and Daniil Tarasov. Is there a split timeshare coming based on the schedule of December, and how do the Panthers strategize with that? And segment number 2, we are going to discuss what decisions the Panthers will have to make in goal in the future. Do they pounce once the eligibility begins, or will the Panthers wait? And then in the third and final segment, we will preview later this afternoon's game against the Calgary Flames, as the Panthers will be right back at home in their second game of this 6-game homestand. Nich, welcome back to the show. I hope you had a great Thanksgiving, and thank you once again for hopping on this show with me.
Not a problem. Happy Thanksgiving, by the way. And I hear, South Florida's having a little bit of a fall/winter spell going on down there.
Yes, 65 degrees in Broward County this morning, right now at 11:10 a.m. as we are recording this. So yeah, I hope everyone out there did have a great Thanksgiving. I hope that especially the people on the Panthers who didn't have family in town had their great Thanksgiving, at which Brad Marchand hosted the teammates of his that did not have family in town. So I hope that those guys especially had a little bit of a sense of community throughout this holiday, and especially, of course, you guys, everyone out there, because this time could also be very difficult depending on finances and everything else. But let's go right to the topics of what we're going to discuss today. So this is something that I've just been thinking about, and once this game is completed between the Florida Panthers and the Calgary Flames today at 4 p.m., we don't know who the starter is as of right now. There's not going to be a morning skate, so we won't know until about 1:30 around there later today. But I'm just looking at the schedule. The end of the homestand is going to have a back-to-back. There's going to be a back-to-back at the beginning of the road trip out in mountain time for the Panthers. There's 4 total in the entire month. And although Sergei Bobrovskys' play has been under par this season, the Panthers have been great in Daniil Tarasov starts, especially as of late. Don't get confused with the actual wins and losses for Tarasov. But for the Panthers here, I'm very interested to see how they strategize the back-to-backs. Not only that, but the starts outside of the back-to-backs, because you look at some of the opponents that the Panthers will have on these back-to-backs. You will have two teams that didn't make the playoffs in Columbus and New York, but there's a lot of great energy on Long Island. And Columbus was barely on the outside looking in at the end of last year as well. But at the same time, I believe that when you look at whether you make the decision to put Tarasov in the net, you'll have opportunities for not only the days off, but there are points of this month, Nich, where you're going to have 2 days in between games. And when you put Tarasov on one side or Bob on the other, depending on how they strategize these back-to-backs, you're gonna have at times 3 days off in between starts for one of these goaltenders, depending on which way they go.
They definitely are. And, I'm glad you brought up the fact of, the back-to-backs, because, you start out, the beginning of December with the 6th and 7th, you got the Blue Jackets and New York Islanders. But what I think we need to look at is the type of opponents the Panthers are going to be playing. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that you're going to see Tarasov play maybe against Nashville and then again against the Jackets because that's where he came from.
Uh-huh.
So that, I don't want to say a revenge game, but he'll definitely want to play that one. Hopefully the Robbie Tallis and the coaching staff do have him penciled in there. But then you have other stops in Utah. You have St. Louis and right now Montreal. So I think it's completely possible that you see Tarasov in 4 to 6 games next month, and it's not out of the realm of possibility that Bob gets a break after November because historically he's not been at his best, and the past couple of games it just does not look very comfortable in that.
Yeah, and recently, right before the dud that he had against the Philadelphia Flyers, although a lot of that had to do with a lot of the guys at the net front for Philadelphia in the previous game. I mean, in between the Oilers game where he got pulled and then his start against Philly, 3 days off in between then for the Panthers, and then if Tarasov were to start against Nashville, you look at between the Toronto game, you see 1, 2, 3, 4. If he were to start the game on against the New York Islanders as well. But then I'm not saying, and I don't want people to get this confused, I don't think there's going to be a complete 180 as far as Daniil Tarasov getting the majority of the starts, but I do believe that there's going to be a point where there could be a possible split timeshare. And you know what? We said this in our pre-show meeting. Chances are they're not going to go in this direction. Chances are Bob is going to continue to want the load, because even in their light practice on Thanksgiving morning, Bob was still out there after giving up 4 goals against the Philadelphia Flyers as well. So he's still motivated to get back on the ice and still be in a position to at least get his routine right, get his head right. But again, there's the benefits to being off the ice and taking a little bit of a break. I mean, hell, we saw that before Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final in 2024, and a lot of us, even myself, were worried about whether they were making the right decisions. But again, you say the trust in Robbie Tallis, and also let's not forget this. There's that back-to-back towards the middle of the month on the 19th and 20th, and then 2 days off, and then Carolina. Part of me wonders if you give Bob the St. Louis game, Tarasov that the game on the 23rd in Carolina, which I don't think will happen. I think they're actually going to go Bobrovsky, and then you have that Christmas break and the roster freeze. Let's not forget that there is the roster freeze towards the end of December, and then right back at it. It's the game against Tampa Bay, which Matthew Tkachuk on his show Wingmen with Brady Tkachuk, they say that skate for that first game after Christmas break is the worst skate of the year. So we'll see if knowing, obviously we knew that, but them actually admitting it out loud, I wonder if the Panthers coaching staff also could possibly put Tarasov in that game against Tampa Bay at home as well.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think about it this way. Right now, a lot of people are saying the Panthers look tired, or maybe it's finally catching up to them. I don't buy that. I understand that they played a lot of games the last couple of years and everything, but at the same time, like, these guys are professionals. They've done a lot of their off-season training to basically limit the amount of, I guess, stress on their bodies to actually kind of like rejuvenate themselves. So I think with Bob, it was very encouraging to see him out on the ice Thanksgiving Day, because routine and consistency is going to be his best friend. So I don't doubt that, he's going to be playing today and, making sure that, he gets back on his game the best that he can. So, and I will say one thing about the Philadelphia game. The team played 20 minutes. Other than that, I don't think he was at fault for probably 3 of the 4 goals. I mean, you can't really blame him on deflections, but at the same time, the team needs to help him out. So when it comes to Tarasov as well, the Panthers need to start looking at, what they may have or what they're going to be doing going forward. So I think that's what we got to look forward to.
And that's a great segue for segment number 2, which I won't add any more to that. So let's actually move on to segment number 2, where we're going to discuss what do the Panthers actually do as far as the future in that, because we have to talk about present. We also have to talk about the decisions looming that Bill Zito and company will have to make on this goaltending tandem, as both of their contracts will expire in the 2026 offseason. We're going to discuss that more next year on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Monarch. And let's be honest, most of us can't even name all of our financial accounts, let alone what they're worth. Between 401ks, savings, and investments, it's easy to lose track, and that could mean leaving money on the table. That's why I started using Monarch, the all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together, all in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. And it's helped me organize my accounts, track spending, and get a better handle on my investments without touching a spreadsheet. Monarch's visual data boards and smart tools make it so much easier to understand where my money is going and how to make it work harder for me. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the crack. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarch.com for 50% off of your first year. That's monarch.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off of your first year. Segment number 2 here on this Friday, November 28th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day on the nation's #1 sports podcasting network, the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So let's discuss the future in net for the Florida Panthers here. Obviously, Bob is eligible to sign an extension at any time. He could do it right now. He could do it towards the trade deadline. But I do believe that no matter what happens this season, we are going to wait to see during the offseason of a decision. And I think that if Bob specifically, just watching his interviews and just the opportunity to talk to him from time to time, I think he's very at peace with himself, waiting no matter what the result is for the end. But there is the backup goaltender for the Panthers, and yes, he's played outstanding. As we consistently have discussed here, he's deserved more wins for the Panthers here. But when you do sign an extension, that offseason, the very offseason that you sign, which was a 1.05 AAV for Daniil Tarasov, and thankfully he's an RFA coming up in the summer. When you sign that year, you cannot sign another extension until January 1st of the next calendar year. So the Panthers can't sign Daniil Tarasov right now. So with the play and knowing the cap is going up, not a lot of guys there's not a lot of guys left to sign there. I mean, Mackie Samoskevich is a big decision that they have to make, but we'll leave that conversation for another time. But looking at the age as well, Nick, this is the time where goaltenders are starting to hit their prime. And you know what? We talk about the goaltending excellence department for Florida. How about Columbus, what they're doing even without Daniil Tarasov? Jack Greaves has been outstanding this season. Elvis Merzlikins can play at a high level whenever he's right. But got to give credit to Columbus for developing him into what he's doing right here in Florida. And I think that with the Panthers and the decision to make, I mean, I think that we shouldn't be surprised if we do hit the new year. It doesn't have to be immediate. It doesn't have to. But sometime before the end of the season, you see a little bit of a short-term deal for Daniil Tarasov. I don't think it's going to be anything more than 3 years, but at the same time, for someone who's about to hit their prime or getting there, I think that somewhere around like maybe $2 million for a few years for Daniil Tarasov doesn't hurt the Panthers. And also whatever Bob makes on his next deal, it's less than what they're doing, what they're going to make combined even this year. So I do think a percentage of the cap leaves the Panthers in a really good place no matter what happens.
Most definitely. And yeah, I don't know if I want to 100% divulge, but I do hear that there have been talks between the team and Bobrovsky. It's very soft. But the contract negotiations are looking like about $6 million per year if an extension was to be signed. So massively reduced, kind of like what Aaron Ekblad took this past summer to stay with the team. So I have to think that the Panthers want to get a little bit more out of Bobrovsky, which he's shown he's gotten better as he's aged with the Panthers. So I don't doubt that there's going to be something there. It's just, to me, how long is it going to be? Are they going
Yeah.
to pay him till he's 40? I mean, they're already paying Marchand until he's what, 42, 43?
43. Yeah.
So, I mean, it might be something like that. But at the same time, I don't want the team to be under a Spencer Knight situation where you sign Bob and then you draft Spencer Knight to be your next number one goalie. It kind of confuses what's going on. So maybe you do Bob for like 2 or 3 years, and then you do Tarasov at 2 or 3 years, and you do a switch later on, just depending on how they play. So with Tarasov, I wouldn't mind 3x2, but with the market and how the salary cap's going up, he'll probably get 3, to be honest.
I wouldn't doubt it. So, and you know what? If this play continues where he's at the save percentage that he's at, which is right now 9-13 for him, there's and you really that contract will show a lot of confidence that you have in the future for Daniil Tarasov and how he's going to develop. And sometimes you got to get ahead of the game whenever it comes to how you project them, because remember, when you sign a contract for a player, you're not trying to pay for someone's past. You're trying to pay for what they are going to be, which you can see it with the Ekblad extension, with the mounting of injuries, and that he's not going to be that above a $7.5 million player if he were to sign that exact same deal on July 1 of this past year. So what are you gonna project? What are you gonna project Daniil Tarasov that he's going to be? I mean, sure, depending on how the Panthers defensive structure as well plays as they get older, because Father Time's undefeated, as well as how well you move around the net and how you're able to protect your goaltender, which the Panthers have done pretty well around their Tarasov. They play a lot looser with Bobrovsky in net. That's also going to be a factor into how long you want to commit, because thankfully, even for the Panthers, there's a lot of clauses in Forsling, Ekblad, and Jones. There's no clauses in Mikola's contract, but I don't think they're going to move him within the next within the first 4 years of that deal. So there's also that flexibility around that, where you could still trim, but at the same time, with the 84 game season coming up next year, that's an opportunity for even a bigger boom in the salary cap as well. So that department doesn't have a major anchor to the rest of the roster.
No, and we got to remember, it was only a few years ago where Bob's contract took up a ton of cap space, and they were not getting the return that they were expecting on that investment. So now, with the cap going up, it's really not like his deal doesn't look bad at all anymore.
Nope.
I mean, 2 cups, of course, but with the money being the way that it is, it's a much smaller piece. So Florida's going to have to turn their attention to other things. I mean, you said Samoskevich, which we'll probably talk about later in the future, but you got to start looking down the center lines. Who you're going to keep. I'm pretty sure the top 3 centers are going to be the same for the next couple of years, but then you got to start making decisions about wingers, things like that. So I think Florida's in a really great position right now, but you're not going to win if you don't have depth down the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Don't have goaltending. So I do believe that Zito and the goaltending, academy, whatever you want to call them, they will be able to get this done, and they will be able to make sure the Panthers are good into the future and keep that cup window open.
Yeah, and just because we have not mentioned Evan Rodriguez about the possibility of him getting traded now with the injuries, doesn't mean that conversation is not going to reappear this offseason, because it'll be the last year of his deal coming up next offseason. And also, the Panthers don't have to make a decision on Eetu Luostarinen yet, but man, the value that he brings, that's one that I'd be very reluctant to move if I'm the front office for the Panthers, on just what he brings as far as a depth perspective, what he can do on the penalty kill. And also, Evan Rodriguez has shown his worth for the Panthers, shifting back to center. So I'm very pleased from what I've seen, and has exceeded my expectations there for the time being, temporarily for the Panthers here. But the Panthers, it's a game day, although this is a later recording for us here on a Black Friday, day after Thanksgiving. But the Panthers do have a game today against the Calgary Flames. And Black Friday has sometimes been great for the Panthers, sometimes it hasn't been. So what do we expect today when the Florida Panthers take on Jonathan Huberdeau, Mackenzie Weegar, and the Calgary Flames later today? We'll discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And the NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets from everything on who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps everything exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving customers 300 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Third and final segment here on this Friday, November 28th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Friday, a Fairbanks Friday edition of the show. Thank you guys once again for joining us. And Black Friday woes for the Panthers. Let's discuss the last few years of the Panthers under Paul Maurice. So up and down for the last two. So 23-24, they come off a 3-0 shutout at home against the Winnipeg Jets, and just expect the Panthers either to be at home after Thanksgiving or close by on a trip that may not be long for them, which last year they won 6-3 against the Carolina Hurricanes and then shut them out on a back-to-back. The schedule is actually very favorable today for this whole week for the Panthers. Just one game on today on Friday, and then they have the whole weekend off, and they don't have a game until Tuesday. So an opportunity for the Panthers to get out early, hopefully get a win. But also, usually, again, it's tougher. It's easier for the away teams to be awake for games like this because they don't have to worry about Thanksgiving plans, opening up their homes, and being stuffed the next day and being a little sluggish. So, but the fact that the Panthers are coming off a loss, Nick, the way they lost as well, I am expecting the Panthers, and I'll say the clean version of this, belt to ... against the league's worst offense in the NHL.
Very, very interesting the way you put that. So you guys can fill in the blank if you want to whatever that is. So I may be on the opposite end, with the way that they lost on Wednesday with a minute left and the fact that I believe the team only played 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this might be a trap game. And the reason being is that they know Calgary is not, they're the bottom of the NHL for a reason. They did have a 5-game heater, but that's probably going to be the highlight of their season. But you also have to think that that's another team that's struggling offensively, and Florida was struggling offensively. So this might be a low-scoring game.
Oh, Lord. Another one.
Yeah, exactly. Or both teams could just break out and score a lot of goals because, you know what, it's after Thanksgiving. Both are trying to give as much energy as possible. So I guess it's anybody's guess right now. I want to be positive, but, I guess the old-time Panthers thinking is still stuck in my head. So I'm trying not to get hurt. But, we'll see what happens. I'm just hopeful that they can take advantage that, Calgary is kind of they're definitely in a rebuild type situation now. And I'm pretty sure they're going to be off shedding off a lot of contracts.
Yeah. And it's funny because a rebuild for them actually looks a little accidental because trying to fill in some of the pieces from losing Johnny Gaudreau in free agency, the trading of Matthew Tkachuk to the Florida Panthers, which I repeat once again that they didn't make that pick that they traded Matthew that the Panthers traded until this past draft, which shout out to Colin Potter, the guy who the Flames drafted at number 32 overall. But it feels accidental. I mean, you still have a foundational piece in goal for Dustin Wolf, who was a Calder Trophy finalist last season, and his team is being caved in night after night. He's trying to save their bacon. They've actually gotten better starts out of Devin Cooley. Dustin Wolf was pulled after 5 minutes in their last game against Tampa Bay, scored 3 goals in just under 6 minutes. So that it's funny because the Panthers are getting a lot of teams that have been blown out by Tampa Bay or have won very close, no in between. But and then Florida's getting some of the leftovers from then. So I hope all of you guys have some leftovers left from your Thanksgiving. But but Flames president of hockey ops, Don Maloney, who's basically the spokesperson for the owner, spoke up recently about anti-tank for Calgary. But you're seeing what not a lot of expiring contracts. Rasmus Anderson is the biggest one that they have. Blake Coleman has 1 year left. He has a 10-team no trade. Nazem Kadri has 3 years left after this season, but he has a 13-team trade list. They don't have to trade him now, but and he hasn't asked for a trade. Apparently, the reports are that nobody has asked for a trade, so people like playing there. But at the same time, with a new arena coming in Calgary, the draft is strong. Why not lean into a tank for Calgary, knowing possibly what's at the end, which possibly is Gavin McKenna out of Penn State. Or Keaton Verhoff, defenseman, there as well. That's another great prospect that they could get. And then by the time they open that new building, they're competitive again.
Well, and you have to look at the report that Craig Conroy is up for an extension, possibly. So that puts not only the ownership but management's confidence that, hey, we are going to either go this way, or hey, your job's safe. Either way, we're going to go. So, Calgary's been on this trajectory where, we got rid of, we couldn't sign Johnny Gaudreau. He wasn't going to stay. Matthew Tkachuk asked for a trade, and they thought, they fleeced the Panthers. Well, we know how that all turned out. And, they got some good pieces back. They just haven't, lived up to their contract status, unfortunately, and now they're anchors to that team. But with that being said, I agree with you. I think the writing's on the wall for them. They're not going to be competitive in that division. So I think it's time to retool, rebuild, and really try to get the most value out of the players that they do have. I think Anderson definitely is going to be gone. And they're going to get a pretty good haul for him. Nazem Kadri is probably also going to be another guy that you're not going to see. He's probably going to get traded in the offseason, if anything. And on top of that, you have to think about what your future is going to be. So what kind of, draft do you want to have? Do you want to fall all the way to first, or are you okay with the top 5 pick? But I just want to say that there is breaking news right now, and this does relate to the Panthers in a way. Mike Matheson just signed a 5-year extension.
Yes, with
worth
Montreal.
$6 million.
In today's salary, in today's salary cap, that looks actually really great. Remember how bad that looked right before the bubble, and he was getting scratched for guys like Brady Keeper.
I mean, I don't know why it's not 8. If Dale could sign him for 8, why can't Montreal sign him for 8?
I don't know. Sometimes it takes going to a new place in order to succeed. So Montreal will have those guys locked up, a pretty good decor locked up for pretty cheap. Nobody's making a super expensive contract. So nobody's making into 8s is what I'm saying there. But looking at Calgary and their draft picks that they have 2 in this coming draft. One of them was from the Noah Hannafin trade to Vegas. So it's funny because Rasmus Anderson, the rumor has been to Vegas, and I'm not going to pretend like I know what Vegas's draft assets look like right now. Actually, I could just pull it up right here. They don't have a first in 2027, so maybe a future first. So it'll be 2 consecutive years of giving Calgary first round picks. I mean, that's all they've done. They've traded so many firsts. I mean, Nick Suzuki being one of them to Montreal as far as one of those guys. So hey, they banners fly forever, and we know that well with the Florida Panthers getting 2 banners up. And hey, although this year's 2026 is unprotected to Chicago, it was worth it for that trade. So sometimes you gotta take those risks and make those trades, because those are memories that you make. But Calgary, at the bottom towards offensive categories, goals for, dead last at 32nd, power play percentage 12.6, 32nd, and then middle of the pack in goals against and PK. So they can defend decently. It's just a matter of the Panthers and just a game where, especially winning board battles and getting that first breakout pass out or flipping it and having them having to reset in the offensive zone, that's going to be really key as far as that for the Panthers. So that's a one big key about keeping at least the big goal scorers like a Kadri and even Jonathan Huberdeau, a playmaker. Although he missed the first part of the season, that's definitely a big key for getting the win today.
Definitely is. I mean, like I said, they have some playmakers on there, so you can't fully take your foot off the pedal, and I hope they don't. I hope they do exactly what you say, and they come out guns a-blazing, and they use that belt, that you referred to, because they don't have another game till Tuesday, so might as well empty the tank, take the weekend to recoup, and then get back at it Monday morning. So I'm hoping for a win, but again, I would not be surprised if something trappy happens.
No doubt. Nobody has over 18 points, and they played 25 games. Nazem Kadri's leading the way. Matt Coronado has 8 goals, 6 assists, so he's up there as well. In 24 games as well. And so we will see. We'll see what the Panthers are able to do in this game if they could. And hey, Dustin, like I said, Dustin Wolf got pulled in his most recent start. We'll see if he's up to the challenge as well against the Stanley Cup champions. I mean, he did shut out the Panthers in Calgary last year. Let's not forget that. So the Panthers might have a little bit of a memory of that game back in December or January of last year. It was during that Western Canadian trip that the Panthers usually get shut out in back-to-back games there. But hey, the Panthers are at home. It's an opportunity post-Thanksgiving. But Nick, I want to thank you so much for joining me once again on another edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for joining me on a Black Friday edition, and tell everybody where they can follow you online, my friend.
Armando, thank you again for having me on. Happy Thanksgiving to you and to all the listeners and viewers on YouTube. Everybody, you guys can follow me on X at Prudentia0. Let's get a big win today. Let's go into the weekend with good vibes.
Yes, and especially with some time off, especially with that. Thank you so much, Nick, and see you next week. And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on Locked On NHL Network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone, and Stu Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So Armando Velez signing off. And you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network. We're your team every day.